Good afternoon.
Steve Plate's taking his seat. Now it's a party. All right.
Look in the crowd.
Well, thanks everybody for coming this afternoon. We have the spot right after lunch. Everybody's digesting. So we're excited to talk about mega projects. I'm Michael Culotta. I'm FTA's Deputy Regional Administrator here in New York City. And in this capacity, I manage the day-to-day operations of our office, which includes a $51 billion portfolio of federal investments here in New York and New Jersey. Prior to my role, I was the office's general counsel, and I was a staff attorney down in DC. We're excited to be here today to talk about mega projects in the tri-state region. I'd like to thank Infraday East for hosting us. The topic of the discussion today will be major capital projects in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. We'll be highlighting best practices and successful strategies for building and rebuilding some of the largest infrastructure projects in the country. We will explore the role of the federal government and project sponsors like the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, the New York Metropolitan Transportation Authority, and the Gateway Development Commission, and the development and delivery of major capital projects. We'll be discussing the key partnerships among stakeholders that are critical to success. We'll highlight some of the lessons learned from some of the mega projects right here in our region. We'll also highlight some of the key pieces of the bipartisan infrastructure law, which will be delivering historic levels of funding to our region. And we'll explain how this financial assistance has the opportunity to provide transformational changes to our riders and our customers. We designed the panel to be more of a fireside chat. I didn't realize until I walked in this room that we're literally sitting right in front of a fireplace, so this is perfect. If we have time at the end, we'll take questions. And we got started a little late, so we plan to run a little late with our lineup here. So without further ado, I have the privilege of introducing a very impressive panel of speakers who are going to share their tips and best practices and advice for building large infrastructure projects. The first panelist, immediately to my left, is my boss, Steve Goodman, who serves as the regional administrator for FTA's Region 2 office in New York and New Jersey. Steve's career spans 34 years in transportation, including 20 at the Federal Aviation Administration, where he was the lead engineer on some of the largest airport construction projects in the Eastern region. Steve also served as the director of FTA's Hurricane Sandy and September 11th recovery offices. In his current role, Steve provides executive direction over a portfolio of $51 billion in federal transportation dollars here in New York and New Jersey. And it includes several of the largest infrastructure projects in the world, including East Side Access, 2nd Avenue Subway, and Portal North Bridge. And let me just say, I mentioned that Steve is my boss. It's the end of the year, and my performance evaluation is coming up. And Steve told me as we were walking in the room that my rating hinges on how well I introduced him. So hopefully that did the trick. Thank you.
There's a survey under your seat. Just please fill it out, and I'll make sure it's part of his appraisal. Thank you.
All right. Our second panelist is Steve Plate, the Chief of Major Capital Projects for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Steve's time with the Port Authority spans over 35 years, where he served as the Director of World Trade Center construction, overseeing all aspects of the $25 billion reconstruction effort at Ground Zero. Steve's portfolio includes the construction of the National September 11th Memorial and Museum, One World Trade Center, which at 1,776 feet stands as the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere, and the FTA-funded World Trade Center Path Hub, one of the crowning jewels and architectural marvels of New York City. Currently, Steve is spearheading the Port Authority's efforts to replace its bus terminal on the west side of Manhattan, not too far from here, which has an estimated cost of over $10 billion and would serve more daily riders than New York's Penn Station. Steve has been a great partner and a great friend to many of us at FTA, and the story of America's resilience after September 11th cannot be told without him. We're thrilled to have him on our panel today. Our third panelist is Naomi Renek. Naomi is the New York MTA's lead strategist for federal policy, and she serves as a senior advisor to MTA's chair and CEO. Naomi led MTA's successful advocacy efforts for federal COVID-19 relief funding, and she is responsible for a wide range of MTA initiatives, including the development of funding strategies for major capital projects. Naomi began her career in transit planning long-term subway service changes, including 2nd Avenue Subway and the short-lived 9 train. She served as chief of staff at MTA's New York City Transit Authority, and she led MTA's efforts to secure Superstorm Sandy emergency relief funding. She is a force at the MTA, and we're excited to have her with us today. And our fourth panelist at the very end is Eric Daleo. Eric is the Chief Program Officer of the Gateway Development Commission, which is the bi-state authority recently created to manage the design and construction of the Gateway program suite of projects, including the Hudson Tunnel project, which would be one of the largest infrastructure projects in the world. Eric previously served as the Senior Vice President of Capital Programs at New Jersey Transit, the nation's largest statewide public transportation system. He led the state's efforts to modernize its infrastructure. He stood up new programs in safety, disaster recovery, and major capital project delivery. Following Superstorm Sandy, Eric served as a special advisor in the New Jersey Governor's Office, and he previously served as a litigation associate at Patton Boggs. Thanks for joining us, Eric, and thanks to Eric, Steve, and Naomi for being so generous with your time today. All right, so my first question is for Steve Goodman. Steve, can you tell us about the role of the Federal Transit Administration and how it supports riders, local communities, and transportation agencies like the Port Authority and the New York MTA? And can you discuss how the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021 and its historic $108 billion for public transportation might be expanding our role at FTA?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thanks for the question. It's a lot to get in a short period of time, so I'm going to try to get through this quickly to give the other panelists an opportunity. I know Steve can use up the time all himself, so I'm going to try to keep this moving along. But I just want to start with show of hands, this past week, how many have either taken a ferry, a subway, a bus, a commuter rail to get to where you want to go, right? So that's a pretty good percentage of the room here. So I think if you don't know what the FTA does, I think I could start off by saying that there's a good chance that whatever mode you took to get here or the hands that you just put up, the FTA had funding in those projects. So it's really important to understand that, the big role that we play. But I just want to say to be here with these panelists and my friends, it's a great honor for me. We have together, along with our respective staffs and many people in this room, advanced some of the most complicated projects in this country, arguably in the world, over the last decade. So thank you, and it's great to be here with you. Let me just set the foundation a little bit about the FTA and what our role is for those that may not know. So prior to the bill, the FTA obligated to our recipients out in the, across the country about $13.5 billion a year. That's with the B. And put things in perspective, about a third of those funds came through our office here in New York and went to New York and New Jersey to support transportation projects. So, I just wanted to, kind of set the stage for the larger conversation here. Our programs, which are, we fund all the things we talked about, buses, all the large capital projects and things like that. But one thing that people don't realize that we also do is we get special appropriations to fund special projects, programs, disasters. And this is how I met my friend Steve Plate to the left, is we brought $4.5 billion to the New York region to rebuild Lower Manhattan, which includes the Calatrava transportation hub at the World Trade Center, as well as the Fulton Center right down the street across Day Street. And then, of course, the South Ferry Terminal. We also, after Hurricane Sandy, as Mike mentioned, we brought $10.5 billion to the region to rebuild the damaged infrastructure as well as make it more resilient. As a matter of fact, these projects, although the event happened 10 years ago, some of these projects take time to get over the finish line because of the complexity, the fact that we're moving these projects through while we're dealing with the other capital plans. So just recently, we just did a ribbon cutting at a maintenance facility in Staten Island that we just made more resilient for the Staten Island Railroad. So we had about a couple of $100 million invested in that particular project. So these projects are complex and span many years and require the collaboration, which is a common theme that you're hearing across, I think, all the conversations that you're going to be listening to over the course of the next couple hours here. The other thing I wanted to highlight is that after COVID, we brought about $25 billion to the nation to help our recipients and the transit organizations not only keep their lights on, keep operations going, but keep people employed and get people where they needed to go, whether it was frontline workers, whatever it was, we were still moving people around with the $25 billion that we made available. So that's a really important thing to know, because this is in addition to the $13.5 billion regular portfolio that I mentioned. So Mike mentioned the bill. Now, there's not enough time for me to get into a whole lot of detail about the bipartisan infrastructure law, but what I would like to highlight is that even at the funding levels that I just discussed, the $13.5 billion, the bipartisan infrastructure increases our budget by about 70% across a lot of our programs, and also added some new programs. This is give us an opportunity to buy new buses, electric fleet, fight climate change, deal with the backlog of state of good repair, and fund other large capital projects, not only in this region, but throughout the country. I do want to just pivot quickly to the mega projects. What I noticed, I sat in a lot of the presentations today, which I was really happy to do and hear all the great work everybody's doing. But one thing that came to mind as we were talking through a lot of these projects is the FTA actually funds a lot of the projects, either funded them or were in the discussions of funding. So again, a very important role. So, we saw some of the Sandy recovery slides that were up with the MTA. We funded those projects. We talked about the Portal North Bridge, which is a very important piece of the Gateway program. The FTA put most of the funding up to that project, which is a couple of $1 billion project. And we're also working with the Gateway Development Commission as they're going through the CIG program for Hudson Tunnel. We're providing the technical support. That's one of the things that we do to help them get through the CIG program. So I just wanted to highlight, as I was sitting through these presentations, I realized, in case people didn't connect the dots, that is what the FTA does. We're here to really support public transportation, to make it safer, to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to get to where they need to go. And by the show of hands at the start of this discussion, it was pretty clear to me that you all know where to find the public transportation here in New York City, because you're here today, and obviously you used it over the last couple of days. So with that, I think, I think I gave a high-level overview of what we do, the kind of projects that we support. But I know we have some other panelists here that like to talk, so I'm going to turn it back over to Mike for his next question.
Thanks, Steve. My next question is for Steve Plate. So Steve, we've worked very closely for many years in our efforts to help the region recover from September 11th and Superstorm Sandy. We formed a strong partnership between our organizations, and we've advanced some of the largest infrastructure projects in the nation together. You are largely responsible for rebuilding Lower Manhattan, and you've shifted your focus now to Midtown, where you're leading efforts to advance the construction of one of the biggest bus terminals in the entire world. Can you talk about what it takes to successfully develop and deliver a major capital project?
Sure, Michael. First of all, uh, to set the stage, when that September 11th happened, I was observing, witnessing what we all witnessed. And we couldn't imagine what it would take to even recreate. You were trying to figure out what happened and how did this happen and what about our friends. I honestly believe that my company no longer existed because we were in that tower. And I was amazed at what people did. Amazed. I mean, I give you one quick story. We were supposed to get paid the end of the week. The controller had lost her brother in the building, and she sent the disc down to Philly to make sure that everybody had their money to pay their mortgages that day. That's the kind of commitment that was required, was expected, not by us, by the individual. And when I look around the room, I look at all those individuals. You know, thank you, Michael, for giving me credit for this, but there were 26,000 people who were involved with this project. I was a very popular fellow when I wrote $250 million in checks every month. A lot of people were very kind to me, but they were motivated. It was higher than that. It was a higher cause, is to rebuild the heart and soul of the greatest city in the world and do it right. And people worked around the clock. And I didn't know what company. Sometimes they say, "Oh, you reported the." No, I work for HNTB, or I work with the FTA, and you know, it didn't matter. We were at a higher level, higher cause. We trusted each other. We respected each other. We challenged each other in a respectful way. We got better than we ever thought we could be as human beings. When I look back at looking at a 200-foot tall pile of rubble and look at what it's today, even I have trouble processing that in my mind. And I used to send signals to my staff to do even better. And you knew I had came up with a crazy idea because their heads would spin around like the exorcism, like he's out of his mind again. He'd lock him up in his office. My amazement was I'd walk in my office a few weeks later and close the door and look at some of my key staff and said, they actually did it. I can't believe it. They followed and it rose to the occasion to accomplish this. So if you think back at that moment, no company, no idea how to do this. Port Authority, who was very fiercely independent, like the son or daughter you have that never wants to borrow money, never wants, we can do it. We can do it on our own. We don't need any help. We realized this was the moment in time where we needed help. And we were adult enough to realize that. We turned to Steve Goodman and his team, and they became family. They became brothers and sisters by our side through a historical, miraculous project that involved not, and I could go on all day about different stories. We got hit with Sandy. We had an earthquake. 125 million gallons of water coming in. Whoever saw that before? If you could think of it, we had it, but we never stopped. We kept moving forward, never giving up. Persistence. Failure was not an option because we're at a higher level. And that's the great city. Now, I'll tell you a quick story. I used to work for great companies, internet. I'll say the company's name. It's a great company, Exxon. Travel around the world. Well, they quickly realized, no matter where they sent me, Paris or Rome, that every time they'd ask me, "What'd you think of the Eiffel Tower?" It's not too tall. The World Trade Center's tall. And they realized I was an ugly New Yorker. I married a girl from Queens. I was a kid from the Bronx. And we spent our whole life being as close as we can to New York City. And being part of this was a very special on a personal level for my wife and I, Nancy, who devoted the last 2 decades to making this happen. But make no mistake about it. I look to you, I look to the industry who really delivered on this. I used to swing a hammer when I was a young man, but not anymore. It's too dangerous. I could hurt myself. I look to other people, and it's really great. I come from a union family. I was a union worker. My mother was the story was my grandfather said, no, you have to go to work so you could pay for your brothers to go to college. She had a scholarship, but he couldn't see it. There was no way I wasn't going to college. There's no way my brother wasn't going to college. They pushed her through college, but I always kept my roots close to the construction people. And when I ran into trouble, I was proud enough to talk to them and ask them. I remember one fellow, we were laying miles and miles in football fields of stone if you go into the Oculus. And I turned to the person who was laying the stone. I said, how can I make you go faster without just telling you go fast? He said, give me a loading dock, give me this, give me that. We set it up immediately, cut months off the project. Respect everyone, learn from everyone. Never think you're better than anyone. I look to the young people. I often ask them, how am I doing? And they give me their sense of it, and I learn from everyone. And thanks to the colleagues, I'm very proud to be part of this small part of what happened at World Trade. They said, are you finished now? I said, no, we're moving uptown to go rebuild the bus terminal. And by the way, it's not one of the biggest, I must correct you, it is the biggest by far.
Apologies. It is the biggest bus terminal.
It'll be noted in your appraisal.
You're doing great, Michael. Hang in. But, people, Gateway is a phenomenal project, and we look forward to working closely with Eric and supporting his tremendous efforts and Chris's. Bus terminal's not to be overshadowed either. The bus terminal moves over 250,000 people in and out every day. And we're projecting up to 340,000. I'm going to stop here in a minute, but I just want to add, but it's not going to be any easy as the projects we used to look at in the rearview mirror. The world is changing as we speak every day. New equipment, new technology. Somehow we have to design buildings that are going to last 100 years. Now, that was great when they had black and white TVs and they hung around a long time, but the way the curve's going now, we have to be totally flexible in everything we do and forward thinking. So I'll stop there. And I thank each and every one of you for the tremendous support that truly made Lower Manhattan come alive, and now is the place to be. If you go down there, people come from all around the world and are amazed at what you people did. And thank you all.
Thanks for sharing those thoughts, Steve. Yep. Okay, my next question is for Naomi. So Naomi, we also have worked very closely for many years, and you have been instrumental and very, very successful in navigating some of the legislative and regulatory aspects of developing and delivering large infrastructure projects. What does our audience need to know about how to build support for a project, get things into the pipeline, and secure necessary funding?
Thanks, Mike. So in our region, there's a lot of support for transit projects. I think we saw at the beginning of the panel, most people, I think, have taken transit funded by the FTA or otherwise here. So people understand the value of transit and the role that it plays in the region's climate and equity goals. So the challenge isn't having support for the project, but really more in the prioritization, both for the federal and for the local funding. At the MTA, we have a capital program that is prioritized. So we have the benefit. There was someone here from MBTA earlier who was saying that they have to go and identify the money for the local match. So our capital program will include the local match that we can point to when we go and look for federal discretionary money. And I'm glad that Steve mentioned the formula program, because that's really what we rely on. That's our bread and butter. And we're here talking about mega projects, but there's state of good repair projects that are in our capital program that really would be mega projects also, but they're funded through the formula. And that's where we have like reliable money that we get year after year. We can count on it, the discretionary money, and we're thrilled to see the volume of money and the number of programs that are in the bipartisan infrastructure law. But that's money that we have to compete for, both within our region, where we have, like we've been hearing today, about the magnitude of projects, big projects, expensive projects, really important projects that are all in the interest of the region, but they're all going after some of the same pots of money. So it's a challenge. And it's particularly a challenge because one of the things that we want to be thinking about is not just how do I get these projects today built, but how do I show progress and get money out the door? So I'm starting today making the case for the next authorization so that we can show progress and show that there's good use to this money. So along those lines, we recently had I think a good experience with the Federal Railroad Administration, because I have to call that out because I have good experiences every day with Steve and Mike and their teams. But with
Thank you.
FRA is it's a newer granting organization. And so, they've been working on the pipeline for the Federal State Partnership Program. I think we're more familiar with the CIG pipeline. How do you get in the pipeline? There's very prescriptive a way that you do it. There's a process, and we know what it is. The new Fed State Partnership Program that got a big chunk of change in the bipartisan infrastructure law is a newer program. And there's an inventory that was released a month or two ago for the Northeast Corridor. The initial FRA issued initial guidance on how they would develop the inventory with a focus on the types of projects and not on readiness. So we thought at the MTA that it was very important that readiness be a key criterion. Our concern, of course, was somewhat provincial, but also really for the bill itself. Because some of our important projects, Penn Access that just had the groundbreaking last week, and Penn Reconstruction, which we heard about earlier today, were projects that would have been deprioritized. So this is something that we came together with some members of the business community, other states in the Northeast Corridor, and in the interest of really having a program through this Fed State Partnership Program that would be able to get money out the door to focus on, yes, the major backlog projects in the Northeast Corridor, but then for the other projects, where is readiness? And that ended up being something that FRA prioritized. So it's important to do some team building, coalition building around regulatory and legislative priorities as well. And our federal partners are really good problem solvers, and they're ones that I think they can help do us, so that can help create strategies so that the regulatory agenda and legislation and grant programs are things that achieve the goals that we want, not just from today, but really so that money can keep flowing and out the door, and we can make the case for the future.
Thanks, Naomi. My next question is for Eric, sort of building on what Steve and Naomi just shared. You recently joined the Gateway Development Commission after spending many years overseeing a well-established capital program at New Jersey Transit. And as you're transitioning into this new role at GDC, can you share with us what you've learned from your past experience and how it is helping you advance the Hudson Tunnel project and some of the other projects in the Gateway program, which would be some of the largest in the United States?
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I'm just looking in the audience, and I'm seeing people here that currently work in public agencies, that have formerly worked in public agencies, or that have worked their entire careers supporting public agencies. And I think if you've done one of those three things, then you know that when you're at a public agency, the pressure that you feel to deliver, because you've got the newspapers watching you, you've got the public watching you, you've got people talking about sledgehammers, people talking about, things that are impediments to their daily lives. And, Mike, at NJ Transit, with you, with the FTA, we felt the pressure to stand up a Sandy program, right? When I got to New Jersey Transit, they suffered $1 billion in damages. We're trying to build a $4 billion program. And I was led into a conference room, and I met 2 staff members to help build that program, right? And then in 2017, when I took over the capital program, right, I met the 7 staff members working on positive train control, where we were 0% in terms of our build, and that we had to get by the end of 2018 to certification, right? And we felt that pressure because if we didn't deliver PTC, our commuters wouldn't be able to ride our trains, right? And similarly, at the Gateway Development Commission, my boss, Chris Calori, Megan Strickland, who you heard from on the last panel, and we got here July 18th, right? Next week will be our 5-month anniversary here. I think I did my math right. That's why I went to law school. But in 5 months, our boss laid out some key objectives. He laid out 6 key objectives for our organization. One is that we had to rip off the Band-Aid, right? That the schedule and the budget, they had to be rebaselined. They had to be actual, right? And we had to be, because we're accountable to the FTA, we're accountable to the FRA, right? To all these stakeholders, and we did that, right? We rebaselined it to a $16.1 billion budget, right? The second thing is we had to provide clarity to the industry. Who is managing this project? Who's going to be responsible for it, right? And one of our first actions was to approve the project sponsorship, clarifying that GDC will be the project sponsor to deliver the project. The third thing was to operate, to hire people, to move forward. We needed an operating budget. And so for the first time, our commission adopted an operating budget. Then we needed a framework. How is the state of New York, New Jersey, Amtrak, how are we going to manage this thing, with multiple stakeholders? How are we going to make decisions, design decisions, construction decisions, funding decisions? How are we going to allocate contingency? And we spent several months negotiating a project development agreement that our board approved last month. That was our 4th objective. Our 5th objective was to get early action construction work ready to be built. And we applied for federal funding to fund essentially a really significant early action construction project in New Jersey, Tunnel Lee Avenue, which you'll hear more about next year. And the final thing is a project delivery partner. We need to build out our staff very quickly to move forward. And to do that, next month, as Megan said, we're going to be putting out a request for qualifications to bring on that team member. And so in 5 months, we articulated essentially 6 key objectives that we needed to meet. 2023, Chris has told Megan and I that he's got like 15 objectives. And we told him that he's got to find other people to do it. But the key, from our perspective, is being honest about what needs to happen, to calling on the resources and asking for the help. Our final objective for 2022 was to request entry into engineering. And we're working with these 2 gentlemen, the administrator and the deputy administrator now, to make that work. Because what we want to communicate to the industry is that you've heard about the Hudson Tunnel project for years, but the project is real, and we're going to put it into construction soon.
Thanks, Eric. So my next question, here's one for the entire panel. We're getting closer to our time here. In 60 seconds or less, 60 seconds, yeah.
Fire round.
Fire round. If you had to leave the audience with one piece of advice or one lesson learned about successfully advancing large infrastructure projects, what would it be? I'll just open it up.
Well, I'll go first, since I opened up, and it seems like a long time. It's like a draft at when you do, I don't know if you do fantasy football, but I haven't had a chance to talk in a while. I would say as an engineer, one of the things for me is that when I came out of school, you're kind of work off on your own. You're in you're kind of in this environment where you don't necessarily always rely on the people around you because you're cranking numbers or you're trying to create a design. And a lot of times you're by yourself. But the one thing I've learned through my career is you can't do it alone. I open with collaboration. I'm going to say that I'm going to end with collaboration. It takes a team. The team here, our extended staffs, the people in this room, and the one valuable lesson I've learned, and I'll share because you have these opportunities where you're here with your colleagues or people you haven't met, is there's really an opportunity to kind of build that network. Because the one thing I found is when you're advancing these complex projects that we're all trying to take on here, is you're going to have a lot of problems along the way. And the one thing you don't want is that first phone call you have to make to somebody who you could have connected with and maybe established a relationship with, is you don't want that first phone call to be a problem. You want it to be something that you've already built a relationship and trust, and that you can work through the issue together. And that's what we've done as a group here. Everybody touched on it. But that is the lesson I would leave with you, is make sure you're taking this time to get to know the folks around you, and don't let that first phone call be a bad one. Make sure that you already know the person before you have to pick up the phone.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely true. So Steve, I think we all know I think we have a relationship with Steve where I have a problem and I'm going to pick up the phone. He's on emergency bypass. He has a problem. Something happens at his headquarters and he's going to call and say, what's this about? What do you know? Can you find out? And so the relationship building is really critical. But being a little bit more specific, at the MTA, we're getting ready to open Grand Central Madison, formerly known as Eastside Access. So that's a project I worked on the full funding grant agreement on quite some time ago. And we have, I think a lot of the lessons from that project are things that have helped build our construction and development unit that our current boss, Jan Oliver, led up until a couple of years ago. And some of the tenets of that organization are to try to make the MTA less onerous to do business with. And we've heard a lot throughout the day about partnering and working with all manner of stakeholders. In particular, we've been working on how do you allocate risk, figuring out who's responsible for what risk, and how do you put provisions around that. At New York City Transit, we're taking responsibility for track outages. I've heard a couple people talk about that today. And Amtrak is doing the same thing for Penn Access. So that is, a concept that I think is really, really critical, especially in our region where we have so much transit, and getting track access is important. Having a single point of contact, also a single project manager is also really, really critical piece. And I said it before, but I'll say it again, like our federal partners can be really good problem solvers on issues. So if you're using their money, they can help you kind of navigate through how do I address this issue in a way that's going to be compliant and that everybody understands, and bring other people in to your problem solving.
You heard about honesty and transparency and the importance of the partnership and stakeholdering. My advice is to the professional services firms that are in the room, which is about being honest to your client. Tell your client if they're not going to meet a deadline. Tell your client if they're not doing something right or the right way. Be brave to say no and to encourage sort of different thinking, because it's a lot of professional services firms out there, when they come into the room, they'll tell you what you think, what they think you want to hear, right? But I've spent my time in public agencies looking for those professional services firms that can think outside the box, tell me that we're not doing it the right way, and tell me that there's better ways to approach a solution.
Okay, so I get the last word?
You get the last word.
Okay, I got to say something nice about Steve, right?
Only if you want funding.
We look at all the differences in New York. It's such a melting pot, and we have so many differences. You see what's going on in the world. We have to focus on something good and common that we all truly believe in. And my staff and everybody I've worked with always set aside our differences and truly looked at what is the goal we want to accomplish as human beings. And we all truly believe that it's leaving a legacy, leaving the world a little better than the day we came into. And when you look at, you talk about transportation, I couldn't even put a number on how many lives we touch and either make them have a good day or make them have a bad start to their day. That is very powerful as engineers, as architects, as planners, as builders. And I'm sure you all do it. You drive by a building, and you've been driving by that building 15 times a day, and you point to your kids, oh, I was in charge of that project, or I did something, and the kids go, yeah, that's enough. But it's part of your DNA. And you look at something at World Trade, which was unprecedented. There was no book. These projects are well beyond anybody's imagination, and that's what it needs, imagination. Look at Bayonne Bridge. We had to raise a bridge 64 feet to accommodate the Panama Canal ships. If we hadn't done that, that would have rendered pretty much our ports of Newark and Elizabeth significantly had negative impacts to them. We raised it right in line. And as a result, and I can't believe these numbers, but I've stress tested, actually a reporter corrected me that I understated the impact. So I know it has to be true. It went from $55 billion worth of goods passing under that bridge immediately to $65 billion of goods that generate economic impact to the region. And anybody want to guess what the number was during the pandemic when everybody was on their phone? And want to throw a number out? I couldn't believe this number. We jumped from $65 billion to $120 billion. We are no longer point number 3. We are no longer port number 2. We are number 1 once again, New York City. So we are amazing people in what we accomplish. I get goosebumps even saying that. Be better than you could ever be, and really respect and trust the colleagues. And it's truly been an honor and a privilege for me, a kid from the Bronx, marrying a girl from Queens, to somehow being in this position and hanging on for dear life as long as I can. So thank you all.
Thank you. So thank you for being so generous with your time today. We'll stick around for any questions in case anybody has any, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Be safe. Happy holidays.